Anyone who thinks that gardening is an affordable hobby has clearly never been to the garden center or nursery in the beginning of spring, when that excitement just hits you and you fill up your cart and your trunk with a bunch of plants. And before you know it, you're a lot happier, but also a lot poorer. So today I'm going to share with you a really budget-friendly way to grow a bunch of perennials. Is gardening an expensive hobby? Yes, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. Hi, my name is Steph and welcome back to my basement. This is where I start most of my seeds, and that's exactly what we'll be doing today. We'll be talking about growing your garden affordably by growing from seed, and specifically focusing on perennials, which are a plant that come back year after year. And those are going to be the best plants to grow for the biggest bang for your buck. Not only am I a passionate gardener, but I also have a background and degree in finance. So that makes me really interested in all things saving money, and I love to apply the things that I've learned over the years in my garden as well. I did a little bit of thinking. Is it really more affordable to grow from seed? After all, at the beginning of the year, I do get quite excited, like most gardeners, and order a few packs of seeds, and those really can add up. But if you think about how many seeds you get in a pack and how many plants you can actually get, the cost per plant is actually quite affordable. Now, there are some things that we will have to take into consideration, such as purchasing soil. How will you be growing these seeds? Will you be growing them in some trays indoors under grow lights? And if you are, there is a little bit of startup cost involved, such as buying a shelving unit, maybe some grow lights, some heat mats, and some trays to start your seeds in. And so all of those things can add up. However, if you grow your perennials with a process called winter sowing, which I've talked about at length here on my channel, and I can link a 5-minute quick start guide for the winter sowing process down below for you to check out. But it is essentially the process of creating a mini greenhouse out of a recycled bottle or container that you will grow your seeds in and then place them outside and let Mother Nature take care of them. The seeds will germinate when the weather signals them that it is time to do so. So if you are going to just purchase a pack of seeds and some soil and use a recycled container, it really drives the cost down per plant when growing perennials. So let me show you what I'll be growing from seed this year that are perennials for my garden. Mullein, also known as verbascum. This is going to be the second variety that I tried growing from seed. The first one that I grew was called Snowy Spires, and it was a pack of seeds that I purchased from Burpee, and they were a beautiful tall white spike flower. They had a little bit of purple in the center, and I believe a tiny bit of orange as well. Stunning. And they come back year after year, and I've even gotten a few more to self-seed out there with no effort on my part, which is wonderful. So this variety that I'll be growing this year, I purchased at a plant sale, a plant last year. It was stunning, and I will actually insert some footage of what it looked like in my garden. It was a wonderful companion to my bearded iris. I have quite a collection of Japanese bearded iris, and mullein makes a perfect companion because they bloom around the same time. And this variety is called Southern Charm. Because that plant that I had purchased at the plant sale was so beautiful, I decided that I needed a bunch more. So I purchased this pack of seeds from Baker Creek, and I will be growing this variety this year. Coneflowers, also known as echinacea. I have grown a number of coneflowers for my garden. In fact, I shared this in a video several years ago. I have grown the white swan variety, the native variety, the purpurea, echinacea purpurea, which is the tall purple pink colored echinacea. I've also grown a variety called green twister, which is a really pretty kind of pinkish purple in the center that fades out to this kind of neon yellow green color. Very pretty. So I will also be trying to grow some more of those this year, as well as a variety called Coneflower Powwow White. Now, the white swan coneflowers that I grew in my garden a couple of years ago, I would say it was about 4 years ago now, they ended up reverting this past season back to the original cultivar of the Echinacea purpurea, which I thought was a really interesting thing that took place. But that happens a lot with plants in the plant world, with conifers and so forth, that they are usually bred and grafted off original or parent plants, and then they breed these new interesting varieties. But over time, it is possible that they revert back to the original cultivars. And that is what I found happened to the white swan coneflower that I grew. It was no longer that beautiful white tall coneflower that I loved. It had reverted to the purple. And while I do have some purple Echinacea purpurea in my garden, in the place that I had the white growing, I preferred a white coneflower. So for that reason, I will be growing some more white coneflowers in the Powwow white variety. Yarrow or Achillea is another really beautiful workhorse perennial in the garden. So I had a variety that I had purchased at a local garden center, and it ended up dying on me because I had it planted in a bed that stays a bit moist and holds on to some water. And these plants, yarrow, really like a well-draining soil that leans dry. So for that reason, I lost my plant. It rotted at the root. I did buy a couple of extra new ones this past season, and I'm hoping that they will return. But if they don't, I'm going to be prepared by starting some from seed. This variety I purchased from Swallowtail Seeds, and it is called Summer Pastels Yarrow. And I believe that these colors will look really nicely with all of the perennials that I currently have growing in my garden. The colors of the mix here are pink, red, rose, apricot, cream, yellow, lavender, purple, and white. So there is quite an array of colors that are possible to get with this pack of seeds. So I'm excited to try those. And here is a new to me perennial this year. This is also a native plant, and what I loved about it was that it looks very much like a thistle or like a sea holly. This one is called Rattlesnake Master, and it is a type of Euryngum, and it is white, and it has a globe-shaped flower that looks really spiky. It grows to be about 4 to 5 feet in height and 2 to 3 feet wide, and it likes a well-drained soil, blooms summer through fall. And I went to the local Ace Hardware the other day and I checked out their seeds and I found this beauty. This is called Malva sylvestris, and the variety is Zebrina, and this is a type of mallow. And it's a really pretty flower. It's white with a bit of a fuchsia in the center, and they get to be, it looks like 3 to 4 feet in height, and they bloom summer through mid-fall. And so I'm planning on putting this in that bed that I have that holds on to some moisture, because mallow does like soil that leans a bit moist. So I think this will be a great option for the center of that bed because it has some height. It makes a great middle of the border flower. And another thistle type flower that's very similar to the Euryngum that I just showed is the Blue Glow Globe Thistle. Now these are in a Ziploc baggie because I collected these for my own plants that I had grown from seed a few years back. I had purchased these Blue Glow Globe Thistle seeds from also Swallowtail Seeds. I grew a few plants and I loved them. So I have been collecting my seed for the last couple of seasons and growing a few extras. So last year in 2024, I grew another half dozen plants and I have them out in the garden. They should bloom this year because, again, perennials will work on root development and foliage the first year, and you will typically get blooms the second year. This one's a real pretty one. Delphiniums, such a magical flower, and they have been bred now to come in even shorter varieties, which are wonderful because they won't require staking. Some of the traditional old-fashioned delphiniums can get quite tall. They're in the same family as larkspur, which is also a pretty tall flower, anywhere from 3 to 5 feet in height. And they do require staking, especially if you have a garden bed that is in an area that's a bit more exposed and might experience some wind. If you don't stake them, they can be floppy and just not look as pretty. So these varieties here that I also purchased from Swallowtail Seeds are a bit shorter. They're considered dwarf delphiniums. And the two that I have are the Magic Fountains Cherry Blossom White Bee and the Magic Fountains Sky Blue White Bee Delphinium. Great plants, beautiful. So I'm really excited to start these two varieties. And columbine. So I have two varieties of columbine that I'll be growing. This is a spring bloomer, and it likes a part shade, part sun location. The variety that I'll be growing some more of this year is the Nora Barlow. This is a smaller bloom and very frilly and ruffly, has petals in shades of pink, a creamy white, and a lime green. Very pretty. So Nora Barlow columbine. And this columbine, which is a more traditional variety, I got these seeds from a friend in my local garden club, and she had cut off some of the blooms from her plant and put them in this bag, and they dried out, and now I have some seeds at the bottom to sow. She called it navy blue columbine, so I'm guessing that it's a shade of blue columbine. So I'm excited to give those a shot. And some more perennials that have also done really well for me using the winter sowing method. Lavender. Now, lavender has a reputation for being pretty finicky, but I think the key to lavender is growing the right variety for your conditions, for your growing conditions. Now, lavender is a Mediterranean plant, so it likes very dry, well-draining soil in full sun. But this variety here that I purchased on migardener.com is the Munstead lavender, which is an English lavender. And because they get lots of rain in England, this variety happens to do really well for me in a bed that stays pretty moist. Now, I grew this from seed using winter sowing about 4 years ago, and it's been growing really well for me since then. But this past fall, I did have to pull it up, and I will be starting over because lavender has a tendency to get pretty woody and look like a shrub after a while, and it doesn't flower as well. So for that reason, I will be starting over, but very easy perennial to start from seed. And lupin. Lupin is a beautiful spike perennial. It grows really well alongside Japanese bearded iris. They bloom around the same time. But lupin, if it is happy, will get really large and quickly outgrow its space. And that is a lesson that I learned in my own garden because I've had to grow it a couple of times because when I've tried to transplant it, it did not like it. It doesn't prefer to be transplanted. It has a very deep taproot, which makes it difficult to successfully transplant. So for that reason, I have lost some plants. So I will be starting it again from some seeds that I collected from my parents' garden. Now, lupin seeds have a really thick and dense outer shell. So for that reason, they benefit from a process called scarification, where you can take a nail clipper and nip a piece of the seed off, or even just file it with a nail file to soften up that shell and give it a point where it'll germinate a bit easier. But lupin grows really well using the winter sowing method and blooms on year 2. I also grew a perennial that did in fact bloom for me the first season, and that was Golden Jubilee Hyssop. This was a gorgeous purple spike bloom that had the most beautiful golden yellow leaves, and the pollinators loved it. There were bees and butterflies all over these plants all season long. And not only that, they smell amazing. They have a fragrance of mint, which was really pleasant. So Golden Jubilee Hyssop was a beautiful perennial to grow from seed and first year blooming. Lady's Mantle. This one I grew for the first time last year. I got these beautiful little tufts of foliage, and this year I should get my first set of blooms. Lady's Mantle, also known as Alchemilla mollis, and the variety that I grew is called Thriller. I purchased these from Swallowtail Seeds, and it is a really beautiful perennial. Even the foliage is gorgeous. It holds on to beads of water from either the morning dew or from rain beautifully. They look like little glass beads, and the blooms are gorgeous. They have these kind of billowy, ethereal, chartreuse, greeny yellow blooms that look very similar to baby's breath. They make a great companion plant to things like pink roses, nepitas, and salvias. They just group really well together. So Lady's Mantle, another great perennial. So let's answer the question, is it cheaper to grow perennials from seed? And the answer is yes. Generally, it is cheaper to grow perennials from seed versus purchasing an established plant. And here's why. Lower cost per plant. A packet of perennial seeds will cost the same or less than a single nursery grown perennial, yet you'll get dozens, if not hundreds, of plants. Bulk growing potential. You can grow a large number of plants for a fraction of the cost, allowing you to fill garden beds really affordably. More variety and rare finds. Seed catalogs offer a wider selection, including rare and unique varieties that may be expensive or unavailable as mature plants. Now, there are some challenges when it comes to growing perennials from seed. One of them is time to maturity. It will take most perennials grown from seed at least a year or sometimes more in order for them to be large enough to start producing blooms. So you do need to have a little bit of patience. Germination challenges. Some seeds require specific techniques in order for them to germinate. One of them being cold stratification, which is the process of exposing your seeds to cold and fluctuating freezing temperatures as well as moisture in order to break down that hard shell on the seed and help it germinate. The winter sowing method is actually great for germinating perennials that require cold stratification because not only is your container outside being exposed to the winter and cold, freezing, fluctuating temps, but there is also moisture in that soil, which will also help breaking down the shell on that seed to germinate. If you live in a warm climate, you can still winter sow your seeds. You will have to go through the process of doing a manual cold stratification, and you can easily replicate this by taking your seed packets, putting them in a Ziploc bag, and throwing them in the refrigerator for a couple of weeks or in the freezer for a couple of days before you go ahead and winter sow them. There is also something called scarification, where some seeds that have a really hard shell will require scarring or nicking in order for it to readily germinate. So it's important to know which type of seed you're dealing with so that you can proceed accordingly. Seedlings are also more delicate than nursery grown plants, and for that reason they'll require a little bit more attention, especially earlier on. Perennials will always give you the best stretch for your money because you start them once and they come back year after year, and usually after about 3 years you can then divide those plants and get even more perennials for your garden. This is especially great if you're working on developing new spaces in your garden. Maybe you just purchased a new home and this is your first go at gardening and you need to get lots of plants to fill some space. Growing from seed is going to be the best way to go about it. Well, I hope that this video was helpful in showing you that with a little bit of patience, if you're willing to put forth the effort, you can grow lots of perennials from seed, which is a fantastic way to save money and to expand your gardens. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful or entertaining, I would love it if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, it is free to do so, and it just allows YouTube to let you know the next time I post content like this. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.